Indonesia, with its diverse culture and natural resources, has made this country able to stand on its own feet. Even though still struggling, its rich nature gives the energy to stand strong again. The power of energy in Indonesia is spread in all corners of the country, starting from oil and gas, coal mineral, electricity, renewable energy to geology. After 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia, a feeling of despair can truly be felt, but everything must go back to normal. Energy retainers continue to be committed to meeting domestic energy needs amid the pandemic. Investment of 282 billion US dollars or 107% from 2020. Non-tax revenue reached 189.2 trillion rupiah or about 156%.
Honorable Chair Energy Transitions Working Group, Mr. Yudo Dwinanda Priyadi, Honorable Co-Chair Energy Transitions Working Group, Dr. Prahoro Nurcahyo, Honorable Director General of New Renewable Energy and Energy Conservation, Dr. Dadan Kusdiana, Honorable Head of Energy Efficiency, International Energy Agency, Dr. Brian Mathaway, Honorable Moderators and all panelists, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon from Indonesia and a very warm welcome to everyone joining from G20 member countries and invitees. I'm Aline Wiratmaja. It is an honor for me to guide you in this auspicious event co-organized by the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia and the International Energy Agency. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, energy transitions have become a global imperative which should be accelerated. Besides becoming one of the three main pillars of G20 Indonesian presidency, in addition, in COP26 Glasgow, countries and broader stakeholders admit that this transition must be just, equitable, and able to create opportunities for enhancing socio-economic development and achieving sustainable development goals, or the SDG. Clean energy transitions will hopefully generate green and quality jobs, improve our life quality, and assure cleaner and healthier environment. In this gigantic task, global agencies have started to work hard and partner with countries to address just, people-centered energy transitions. These are joint works involving cross-sectoral cooperation, of course. Recently, the International Energy Agency, as the co-organizer of this event, launches the Global Commission on People-Centered Energy Transitions and releases pertinent recommendations on the transitions. This work has been developed from the process on stock take and lesson learned from other international organizations, for example, ILO, OECD, and World Bank throughout international conferences. People-centered energy transitions relate to three priorities of the Energy Transitions Working Group, or the ETWG of G20 Indonesian Presidency: accessibility, technology, and of course, financing. Starting from this event, we expect that main points and conclusions on people-centered energy transitions from this webinar would become main ingredients for G20 Bali Energy Transition Ministerial Communique and Bali Leaders Summit. These key results would also be expected to be endorsed in Energy Transitions Communique and key deliverables. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, before starting our first agenda, I would like to inform you several housekeeping rules. This workshop will last for 2 hours and can be accessed in Indonesian as well as English. To listen to your preferred language, you can click on the interpretation button located at the bottom of the screen on this webinar control buttons. Then select the language you want to listen to, English or Indonesia, or select off if you don't want or you don't need the translation feature for this webinar. To begin this webinar, we are pleased to have Mr. Yudo Dwinanda Priyadi, Chair Energy Transitions Working Group, to deliver his opening remarks. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Yudo Dwinanda Priyadi.
Distinguished speakers and participants, greetings to you all. Good afternoon from Jakarta. Please allow me to welcome all of speakers and participants in the first session of this G20 webinar series. My name is Yudo Dwinanda Priyadi, the Chair of Energy Transition Working Group, ETWG, with my colleagues Mr. Prahono Nur Cahyo, the alternate Chair of ETWG. With the main theme of Recover Together, Recover Stronger, G20 Indonesian presidency has set three pillars, namely global health architecture, digital economic transformation, and sustainable energy transition. The pillars of sustainable energy transition under ETWG addressing three priorities on accessibility, technology, and financing. We have done the first meeting of ETWG about 1 week ago in Yogyakarta. In that meeting, G20 members and invitees unanimously endorsed the three priorities in energy transition and the main agenda, heading towards the minister meeting and leader summit in Bali. We call all these stages as the road to Bali. Realizing the road to Bali between the meeting of ETWG, we will deepen issues of energy transition through the series of virtual webinars. Today, webinars on ensuring people-centered transitions for all will become the first of them. So, why just energy transition matters? Becoming key takeaways from COP26, just energy transition become the confluence between shifting towards more sustainable energy, eradicating poverty, creating decent, green and quiet jobs, and also boosting green economy. More importantly, emphasizing leaving no one behind. These critical necessities are the keys to achieve Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and also prepare just and equitable net zero future. We can also say that just energy transition will become transformational economic opportunities towards greener and more sustainable manner. However, we should reconsider that just energy transition are actually beyond economic opportunities. These are because in the transitions, we must mitigate the pressing impact of social welfare beside greening our growth. A people-centered approach in clean energy transition ensure the benefit and cost involved in the transformation of our energy system are distributed fairly and in a way that protects the most vulnerable in society. These are also because the heart of this transformation is job shifting. Job shifting is the core of our interest at human resources with a challenging question. Is our human resources capable to match the needs of the transitions? For our illustration, clean energy industries such as efficiency, automotive and construction would require a further 16 million workers. This means a total of more than 30 million jobs must be created in clean energy, energy efficiency, and low-emission technologies by 2030. To the International Energy Agency, IEA, I would like to convey our presidency's highest appreciation and gratitude for taking the strategic role as co-organizer of this webinar. IEA has established the Global Commission on People-Centered Energy Transition. The Global Commission works on recent experiences and best practices from around the world to develop just transition notes collected from international forums and organizations in recent years. The Global Commission recognized that local circumstances and clean energy pathways will differ, and therefore this recommendation might be diversely applied. The recommendation, among others, cover the endorsement on decent and quality jobs with benefit to social welfare, the protection of impacted workers and communities in the transition, the equity and social inclusion of transition policies, and the involvement of citizens and youth. Therefore, the recommendation, practices, and experiences of people-centered energy transition could become the powerful stocktake for strengthening the key deliverables of G20 ETWG. Looking ahead, just and equitable transition will amplify the sustainable energy transition pillar and significantly contribute to the result of the energy transition ministerial and the leader summits. Without further ado, to the IEA, all key speakers from the global and national entities, G20 Troika, and all G20 members and invitees, I wish you all have a successful webinar. Thank you.
Please, huge round of applause for Mr. Priyadi. Yes, thank you very much for your insightful opening remarks, Mr. Priyadi. Ladies and gentlemen, it is also a great pleasure that today we are joined by Mr. Anil Kumar Jain, Secretary in the Ministry of Coal of India. I'm honored to invite Mr. Anil Kumar Jain to deliver his opening remarks. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Anil Kumar Jain.
Thank you very much. Let me place my gratitude to the Indonesian presidency of the G20 and IEA for inviting me to this webinar. My warm greetings to all the persons who have joined into this webinar virtually. Let me at the outset also congratulate Indonesian presidency for holding this webinar on such an important topic. So far, we used to only hear about energy transition. The addition of this word, this clause, people-centric, has made all the difference and should go a long way in bringing the world into one cohesive mass to take this challenge of climate change forward. I also want to take this opportunity to appreciate IEA's work in having formed the Global Commission for this task as well as the advisory body. This topic could not have come at a better time. Global warming is acknowledged now by all and sundry. There are indications of support from the West to developing countries in terms of technology transfer, capital transfer. The nitty-gritties, of course, we still wait to be firmed up. Most countries have made net zero commitments, and there is less friction at the international stage on how to take this agenda forward. What is at the heart of this debate which brings us together into this event? Why is the developing world cautious, and there is a need to make it a people-centric agenda and keep this in mind? The number one reason is that most developing countries still, and many developed ones too, have a large dependence on fossil spread across coal, oil and gas. And there is a fear that will there be a rush towards making this transition while energy demands are still growing in our countries. And renewable is today not in a position to substitute the fossil footprints, even if it can just take care of the growth in the energy demands of these countries. Number two, there is sheer inequity between the conditions where the developing worlds lie in terms of capital availability, in terms of the energy consumption. And then there are technological challenges. What is the carbon budget left, which the scientists tell us? How much will India get to contribute to it? How much will Indonesia get to contribute to it? We are talking about hydrogen, battery, So where are they? What is carbon capture going to do? So there's so much up in the air, which makes the developing world nervous. What is the way forward? Let me acknowledge that there is, as I said earlier, there is no doubt that we have to build a clean energy future. Fossil has to step back. But what are the steps which we need to take to make this transition friendly to the developing world and equitable? As I said, fossil fuels are still relevant for the next 1 or 2 decades or even more. Now that is something which needs to be factored into the people-centric energy transition agenda. Next comes the huge cost of transition. Cost of transition in terms of creating renewable energy infrastructure, skilling the people, relocating them, rehabilitating them, providing them the technology. Even if we look at the IEA's report of the global commissions, where the recommendations have come through, you will notice that the number of case studies referring to the recommendations basically talk of the developed world having funded little case studies to showcase those implementations. We come across very few examples of the developing countries having done them. So this creates a scare. What about the jobs which will be lost in the energy transition? India has a huge footprint, 58 to 59% of our commercial primary energy comes from coal. 72% of our power comes from coal. So the coal producing regions, the transportation network that we have developed, the power plants, what will happen to all that infrastructure and the people engaged in it? There's a large government presence in generation and evacuation of this energy, which supports a number of subsidy programs, number of transportation arrangements. So they've all got to be substituted. So the agenda is quite vast. In the end, all I want to say is that empowering the societies who will be at the brunt, at the cutting edge of this transition need to be brought in. We need to engage with them. And it is in that respect that I would recommend that the work which is being done by IEA, the work which is being done by G20 and World Bank needs to be supported. We need to bring the societies and the countries, developing countries and the developed countries on a common table to be able to discuss this people-centric agenda and what needs to be done, and little away from the din of what the scientists are saying or what the hydrogen agenda is. We have to first address the today and the tomorrow before we go to 20 years, 30 years down the net zero agenda. Thank you very much once again for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anil Kumar Jain, for your engaging opening remarks. And to get some insights into the topic, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Dadan Kusdiana, Director General of New Renewable Energy and Energy Conservations, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia, to deliver his keynote speech. Please welcome Dr. Dadan Kusdiana.
Good afternoon from Jakarta. I really appreciate and also sincere gratitude for the cooperation between Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources and International Energy Agency for preparing and organizing today's event. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, the speed of energy transition differs between one country to another. Some experience energy transition as the stimulation of sustainable economic growth, while others, including Indonesia, need a breakthrough in policies, financial support, technology partnerships, and measures in addressing socio-economic impacts to enable faster pace of energy transitions. Indonesia has been developing a roadmap toward net zero emissions which includes a scenario of coal-fired power plant gradual retirement. Starting in 2026, there will be no plan to add new coal-fired power plant, while the last power plant will be in operation in 2056. We have issued a Green RUPTL 2021 to 2030 in order to achieve the NDC and also net zero emission target by allocating 52% share of renewables to be developed or equal to 20.9 gigawatt additional capacity. After 2030, electricity supply will only come from new and renewable energy power plant, such as solar, followed by wind and ocean energy. Hydrogen and nuclear will also be utilized in 2031 and 2049. However, fossil fuel will still be used to meet energy demand for a certain period of time as Indonesia is still progressing toward a net zero emissions. Hence, several strategies need to be developed to minimize the use of these fossil fuels. Among others are reducing the LPG consumption by providing alternative energy sources such as city gas, managing the subsidized LPG only for the poor and vulnerables, and also replacing the price subsidy to direct targeted subsidy. Other programs are to reduce fossil fuel utilization, such as a gradual retirement of coal-fired power plant, biomass co-firing for existing coal-fired power plants, and conversion of diesel fuel by local-based renewable energy, and also development of low-carbon technology such as CCS and CCUS if technology and economically feasible. Comprehensive policy reforms are carried out to support the implementation of these strategies. It is expected to achieve budget savings, reduce poverty and inequality, gender and social inclusion, increase the use of clean energy alternatives, and eventually achieve the energy transition. I believe that energy transition will be a strong driver for job creation and welfare improvement. So human resources are also essential for the success of the transitions. They should be prepared through training to enable them to shift jobs from mining to renewables. Currently, for example, Human Resources Development Agency of the Ministry has been giving training to local human resources, particularly to maintain renewable infrastructures. A coherent strategy for energy transition should be able to create economic opportunities for workers while providing clean energy access for the people. In terms of community development, we have empowerment programs such as startup development for young generation, namely Patriot Energy Program and Guerrilla Program. We have sent around 100 young graduates to the village and allow them to make a plan on how to develop the economic development in the village through the input of renewable energy development. For a guerrilla program, in particular, it is targeted to promote the development of solar rooftop PV programs. Renewable startup for young generations are also developed to encourage innovation and investment in the field of bioenergy development, rural electric services, rooftop solar PV, waste to energy, electric vehicles, energy storage, renewable data management, and also energy efficient equipment. So in closing, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, our common share in achieving sustainable energy transition should always be on fire, as there will be challenges ahead of us. By the spirit of no one left behind, let us work hand in hand to achieve the target of energy transition. Thank you, and may we all have a good day.
Yes, thank you for your comprehensive presentation, Dr. Dadan Kusdiana. We really appreciate it. Always on fire, as you mentioned. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to our main agenda, the panel discussion. It's an absolute honor for me to invite our moderator for the session. Dr. Brian Mathaway is head of the Energy Efficiency Division at the International Energy Agency, overseeing a range of analytical and outreach programs supporting energy efficiency globally. In this position, Brian leads the IEA's work with the Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions. Please welcome our moderator, Dr. Brian Mathaway.
You. And good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be joining you from here in Paris at the headquarters of the International Energy Agency. And we're honored and delighted to be working with the Indonesian G20 presidency and all of our friends and colleagues at today's meeting. A particular thanks to Pai Yudo and Dr. Dadan for great collaboration. And I also, of course, want to thank Dr. Anil Jain for his wise words at the start of this session. We're very pleased to be working on this very important issue with all of our friends and colleagues. And as we've already heard, the topic of people-centered energy transitions is a vital one for all of us. Because, of course, at the end of the day, clean energy transitions are about making people's lives better. It's about mitigating the worst effects of climate change, but also creating jobs, improving quality of life, bringing affordable, secure energy access to people in all parts of the world. And that is why putting a people-centered and inclusive focus is so important. And of course, these transitions will not succeed without bringing people with them in terms of participation, making sure the benefits reach the maximum number of people, and making sure that people who may be adversely affected are properly protected and included in the transitions that we are all undertaking over the coming years and decades. So we have been honored to work with so many of you through the process of the Global Commission for People-Centered Clean Energy Transition, including many ministers and senior thinkers from G20 countries and beyond. And we're hoping to hear some additional insights into these very important issues today, and we have some excellent panelists. And so I want to go straight away. I want to thank the three panelists in this session in advance, Martha Newton, Mark Keyes, and Michael Stanley, for their participation. All, as you will see, key thinkers and key actors in this space, and I know we're going to hear some very interesting thoughts from them. So let me go straight away to our first panelist, who is Martha Newton, who is the Deputy Director General for Policy at the International Labour Organization. Martha, thank you very much for joining us, and the floor is now yours.
And thank you so much, Brian, and just thank you all for the invitation to speak at today's event, and in particular to our G20 presidency hosts and Mr. Dwanda Piatti for your eloquent opening remarks, and again for the IEA. We're really facilitating this important work, putting people at the center of discussions to recover together and recover strongly. So I want to just state at the outset that ensuring a just transition for all is really a key enabler to a rapid and ambitious energy transition. And for the first time, COP26 Glasgow Pact set forth a path to accelerate efforts towards the phasing down of unabated coal power and phasing out of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies with the just transition. However, clearly, as COP26 delegates have put it, this is only possible with support towards a just transition. And as we've seen this week, the latest report on the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that was released notes that equity and just transitions can enable deeper ambitions for accelerated mitigation. So applying just transition principles and implementing them through collective and participatory decision-making processes is an effective way of integrating the equity principles into policies at all scales. So really, just transition, here at the ILO, we think about putting social justice and the creation of decent work at the center of energy transition. our estimates that the implementation of the Paris Agreement on climate change through measures in a variety of energy sectors, whether that's renewable energy development or energy efficiency or sustainable transportation, could create 24 million new jobs by 2030. But we also know that it could result in 6 million job losses worldwide in the fossil fuel industries. And so both the creation and the loss of jobs are unevenly distributed across the world, with loss of employment, as we've heard, likely to be geographically concentrated. And when it comes to employment in coal mining and coal power generation, often the transition of the workforce faces additional complexities. And Dr. Kumarjan, you indicated in your remarks, this can create a concern, a scare for people. So, these jobs tend to be in specific regions and communities where the creation of new employment opportunities is not always in the same locations. So this really makes it difficult for workers to access new job opportunities. And we've seen over decades that mine closures have happened around the world in various contexts, levels of economic development and political circumstances. And so we've got much to learn from what's worked well and what hasn't worked so well to help guide our collective actions into the future. So I just want to quickly kind of focus on 5 aspects that we here at the ILO feel are critically important. One, on assessment and planning. Assessment and planning are important in managing the exit from coal and other fossil fuels. This can inform the nature and scale of changes likely to occur in the labor markets, the economy and society, including at the community level. And planning really helps to identify workers that are likely to be the most affected, whether that's directly or indirectly, to develop a profiling of workers for reskilling purposes, and to take stock of programs that are in place to facilitate labor market transitions. And then integrated policies are indispensable. And this implies that comprehensive national policy frameworks, including for skilling, industrial and sectoral policies, enterprise development, social protection, all underpinned by effective social dialogue, policy, and institutional coherence. And in this regard, the ILO tripartite guidelines for a just transition really offer a good basis to build upon. And in addition to policies, these past experiences show that coal mines and power plants operate as part of an extended ecosystem and part of complex supply chains, which involve many service providers, whether it's transport companies, other manufacturers, in addition to local businesses. So as a result, just transition policies can't be confined to the single operations of a plant, but need to consider the links and the interdependence with other economic activities locally and even beyond. And then another important matter, number 2, is skilling. We've got to pay important attention to skilling. It's important because coal mining workers might not have the skills that are easily transferable to enter other occupations. And so really the question of transferability of skills is really going to be central for us to consider. Importantly, this requires different approaches according to skill levels. You have workers who are in low skilled occupations, and an effective focus could be on the job learning or short reskilling or upskilling programs. In medium skilled occupations, the effective actions would be short to longer upskilling and reskilling programs, and then really focusing on TVET, the technical and vocational education and training courses. And then, of course, in high-skilled occupations, support could be provided for university degrees, longer upskilling programs, and more continuous training programs. But at the same time, measures to support enterprises to adapt and transform themselves is really essential. A clear policy direction, a supportive business environment, and this is important. Well-functioning markets, they have to play a crucial role. An example of this is Canada skills trainings program for energy transition, It's really considered a useful model to invest in training and skills and reskilling to take advantage of emerging employment opportunities in clean energy sectors, including skills development and various economic diversification activities. Social protection is another important point I want to talk about today. It's already largely a deficit around the world, with some 4 billion people still without any social protection coverage. And successful programs to phase out coal operations have involved, some sort of immediate income support, in addition to unemployment benefits through a variety of active labor market policies. But it's important to note that workers out of formal mechanisms of coverage, including those in the informal economy, really, pose a unique challenge, including when the closure of an informal mine operation takes place. So social dialogue and consultations are another important point, central to the whole process. Countries' experiences demonstrate that where social dialogue has taken place among governments, employers, and workers, it's been possible to forge social consensus and make these transitions work and acceptable. For example, at the national level, we have in Germany, the Commission on Growth, Structural Change and Employment, the Coal Commission. It's a national process that builds consensus on the phase out of coal and promotes just transition. And the German federal government established this commission in 2018, and with representation from a wide range of stakeholders to promote social dialogue. We've seen in South Africa, their National Planning Commission efforts to focus on developing those pathways for a just transition, by 2050. We've seen that the importance of social dialogue in this process and engagement with relevant stakeholders in their country's transition out of coal. And then more recently, we've seen South Africa establish the Presidential Climate Commission to advise the government on the pathways how to transition South Africa out of a low carbon economy and a climate resilient society. And members of the commission are tripartite: business, labor, government, and in addition, civil society. And then financing. I'll be really brief for this, but financing for a just transition has been lacking in many cases, but it's a central pillar of a coal phase out. It's indispensable to mobilize public and private financing for just transition. And so really doing this is going to require a fundamental change of our mindsets, one that considers social spending in the context of decarbonization as a cost, to one that recognizes that such expenditures are indeed investments. And financing related to national capacities, and there are important differences in the capacity of countries at various levels of development. And there are many useful models and ongoing experiences that we can all learn from and build upon. For example, I know we're short on time, but the EU Just Transition Mechanism aims to help regions and communities that will be adversely affected by structurally shifting away from carbon intensive activities, whether that's through a just transition fund that provides grants to regions, a dedicated just transition scheme that helps attract private investments, and then a public sector loan facility backed by the EU budget to be used for loans in the public sector. But I want to focus on something that sometimes we don't often hear in this discussion, and that's the gender dimensions. So similar to the geographical disparities that we've heard about, the energy transition will have a very important gender equality dimension. Some of the most negatively affected industries, whether it's extractives or heavy industries, have male-dominated workforce, and calling for a gender-responsive transition policies in certain regions be helpful. So, at the same time, female employment is significantly present in the chain of suppliers and service providers linked to extractives. In certain cases, just transition plants left aside female workers, directly or indirectly affected by the closure of coal plants. So job reallocation across sectors can also be marked by gender disparities. We found here at the ILO in our research that nearly 20 million jobs possible in the sustainable energy transition. Of those 20 million jobs, only 6 million jobs would accrue to female workers in the absence of specific policies for higher female participation. So, just to conclude, we've got to really work together through this, through well-coordinated action-oriented and results-focused international cooperation. And we've seen that the international system is stepping up. We here at the ILO have a wide range of partners that are helping to spearhead the Climate Action for Jobs initiative, which was launched at the 2019 UN Climate Summit and has a rally of a coalition of 48 countries globally. And this initiative really supports bold solutions for human-centered transition that delivers decent jobs and advances social justice. So again, thank you so much to the Indonesian presidency, Terima kasih. Thank you. We look forward to expanding our collaboration around our common goals of people-centered transitions. And we at the ILO stand ready to work with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martha. That was very interesting and very wide-ranging. And I like the focus you brought on many aspects, including assessment, planning skills, social protection. But of course, thank you for bringing in the gender dimension as well. And some of the country examples you mentioned, we'll hear about in a later session, including the EU, Germany, and South Africa. Martha, could I ask you a quick question, if I may? At the start, you rightly said that the new assessment from the IPCC this week reminds us how urgent and pressing this problem is. And while the new analysis emphasized just transitions very strongly, some of the elements you spoke about, Martha, including social dialogue, assessment and planning, they take time to do well, in some cases years, if not decades, to really do this well. Would you be concerned that there's going to be a tension between the growing urgency of energy transitions and the time taken to do them in a really people-centered and inclusive way?
I mean, yes, we know that this is all going to take time, but I think we need to work through, the appropriate channels. I think my concern, I'm a very half glass full person, Brian. So I try to I think for us to be successful, we have to really keep our eye on the ball when and talk in the context of opportunities and and the challenges related to those opportunities. I want to point, Brian, I think for us, we just had our governing body here at the ILO last week, and we will be convening in 2023 the first discussion on just transition with the ILO partners, with the workers, employers, and governments that I know that we will help advance. And I think probably is that really, countries can go at their own pace. There's, what really matters, Brian, is that we get it right. And I think in order to get it right, we really have to, include all stakeholders. That's workers, employers, and governments. So, I think where we can, for the ILO, that's a natural space for us as our convening space. But really, to be able to tackle these issues, that's probably, where my focus is right now. Over.
Thank you very much, Martha. And I think that's a very wise approach. So thank you for that. And your mention of skills a couple of times leads nicely to our second speaker, who's Mr. Mark Keys, who's the head of the Skills and Employability Division at the OECD. So Mark, thank you very much for joining us, and we would invite you to take the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Brian, and let me thank the G20 presidency and the IEA for this opportunity to say a few words from the perspective of the OECD on clean energy transition policies and ensuring a people-centered transition. At the OECD, we are taking a broad approach to the crucial question of how can we ensure that the transition towards net zero emissions is inclusive and fair and continues to enjoy strong public support. The advantage of being an organization that has expertise in many policy areas and works with all parts of governments is that we can help to join the dots in dealing with complex cross-cutting issues, such as climate change, that requires a whole of government and a whole of society response. For example, we have work underway that includes an analysis of the implications of the green transition for workers, communities, and regions, and what policymakers can do to support this transition. This includes an analysis of the skill needs of a rapid net zero transition and the distributional effects of climate policies. Lastly, but importantly, we are working on the role of education systems in preparing young people for the transition. Now, we are bringing many of these work areas together through a major OECD horizontal project on net zero emissions and resilience. Drawing on this work, let me now turn to the specific issues of today's workshop on what countries can do to provide effective employment and income support for communities and workers in the coal supply chain that will be affected by the clean energy transition. First, there are a number of lessons that can be drawn from the earlier work that the OECD has done on assisting workers whose jobs have been or will be displaced by other megatrends such as digitalization and globalization. The three key lessons that can be drawn from this work is the importance of anticipation, what Martha has called assessment and planning, timely targeted intervention, and broader supportive policies. Let me deal with each of these in turn. On anticipation, the shift out of coal mining is inevitable, and so we can plan and should plan to support coal miners who will be affected by this phase out, as well as those workers and communities that are directly or indirectly dependent on the coal mining industry. Now, part of this planning is to better anticipate the speed of this transition and to factor in fact, a faster transition that may well be needed, as highlighted in the recent IPCC report. As already highlighted by the ILO, a key part of better anticipation is also better consultation with the key stakeholders on the necessity for this phase out and the measures needed to support workers and their families affected by the phase out. Germany's Coal Commission has already been highlighted by the ILO as a good example of where there has been this strong engagement with stakeholders. And I just want to draw attention to the new German federal government's call for an even more ambitious target of phasing out coal by 2030. On timely and targeted intervention, a key lesson in the OECD's reviews of government assistance to workers whose jobs have been lost because of structural changes in the economy is to act quickly. Only intervening once workers have lost their jobs or once they have exhausted their severance pay can delay the transition process to new jobs. The longer that workers are unemployed, the harder it becomes for them to find new jobs. But these early interventions also need to be targeted. For example, taking into account the skills possessed by coal miners and other workers, addressing health issues and other barriers to taking up new jobs. A good example for helping displaced workers is Sweden's tripartite job security councils, which intervene early to provide job counselling and training services even before dismissals take place. Australia provides another example with its skills audits to assess the skills of workers facing mass redundancy and then orientating them to suitable training programs. More specifically for the coal industry, several US states have introduced measures funded through the Federal Power Program to assist communities and individuals affected by the phasing out of coal mining to diversify their economies, create jobs, and provide employment support and skills training. The third key lesson from our work on displaced workers is the need for a whole-of-government approach to provide comprehensive support for workers and communities affected by job loss. This goes beyond immediate employment training support and includes local economic development and better framework policies for promoting mobility. These policies can include revitalizing mining communities through creating alternative employment opportunities, including by expanding the tourist industry, investing in renewable energy, and rehabilitating and reclaiming land affected by coal mining. Examples here are, of course, the various German initiatives that are accompanying its phasing out of coal mining. Another example comes from Australia concerning the closing down that took place of its traditional car manufacturing sector. This took place over a very rapid time scale, and its automotive transformation scheme provided support not only for helping the directly affected workers to find jobs elsewhere, but also for businesses throughout the supply chain to diversify and innovate. Finally, we also need to take a cross-border approach to the clean energy transition. A rapid phase out of coal is an existential necessity for the whole planet, and therefore a fair and inclusive transition should take into account issues of vertical equity between richer and poorer countries in implementing the costly interventions needed to decarbonize. Here I note, as did Marta, the International Just Energy Transition Partnership with South Africa, that was recently announced by France, Germany, the UK, the US, and the EU. And this will help accelerate the retirement of South Africa's coal plants and the deployment of renewable energy. So let me end by saying that we can and must do better to avoid a rapid phase out of coal, but this needs to be accompanied by measures to ensure a fair and inclusive transition for affected workers and their communities. This requires a joined-up approach based on better anticipation, more timely and targeted support, broader supporting policies, and a global vision for assisting developing economies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for the wide-ranging examples you've included, and particularly for the emphasis on acting quickly, which I very much agree with, and I think resonates what we heard from Dr. Anil Jain in his opening remarks in terms of the need to focus on now, as he put it, right, which I think was correct. And Mark, given the range of examples you shared with us, which I think are very instructive, I'd like to ask you a question about the potential for learning from each other, because as you and other speakers have stressed, each circumstance is different, countries have different contexts in which they work. So how much do you feel that countries can learn from each other in these processes, or how much do you think that each case is unique?
Well, thank you very much for that question, Brian. So learning from each other is important, and I think we shouldn't just limit the learning from between countries, but also from different areas. As I mentioned, we've done a lot of work on displaced workers in different sectors, and I think there are a lot of, we can learn from those examples. I think international fora like the G20 provides an excellent way that we can actually build upon those good examples and share those good examples. I've participated in a number of G20 meetings on different areas, like how can we promote a more responsive adult learning system, and these G20 fora have been great ways of actually sharing that information. If we think about extending a sort of more a specific instance where we can actually share those examples more generally, that's something I think that is a question perhaps for G20 sort of countries and for the G20 in general. I think this type of workshop is an excellent example again of how that can be done. But I would sort of urge that we don't just need to sort of look at examples specifically for the coal industry. We can actually draw upon other examples for other sectors, and that should be brought into the equation. And then just also plead for getting the framework conditions right, and that's important. So it's not just about what measures, ad hoc measures we need for the coal industry, but ensuring that our systems more generally are responsive to the shifts that will be required as a result of shifting to a greener economy. For example, adult learning, Martin from the ILO highlighted again the importance of skills and upskilling and reskilling workers because of shifts out of coal, but also because of shifts more generally out of brown industries into greener sectors and greener industries. Again, we have a lot to say at the OECD about how can we make our adult learning systems more robust to dealing with these types of structural changes and more responsive. And that's there are also important lessons to be learnt from that.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you. Now, a key global actor in this area is the World Bank, who has been mentioned several times, and therefore we're lucky to be joined by Michael Stanley, who's the global leader of the support to coal transition in the World Bank. So, Michael, thank you for joining us, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join you and all of the other speakers this afternoon and the opportunity to speak. I will go quickly through a methodology the World Bank uses. It's being deployed in a great many countries around the world today. And I believe there's a slide presentation to be shown if it comes up. Is there a slide presentation? There it is. Great. So I won't repeat. Certainly, I very much appreciated the comments of Martha and Mark, and so I shall not repeat what they have already said. Next slide, please. From 2016 to 2018, the World Bank did a very deep forensic review of 4 decades of our lending on coal closures. As Martha pointed out, the social impacts fall heavily on the coal mining side, and so we looked at a great many lending operations, and from that we distilled our lessons learned, which are in the lower left of the screen. A publication was put out at COP24 of our lessons learned. And then in 2020, we put out a series of case studies on that. What you see is a transition from national level planning and central government functions, which remain vitally important, but certainly we have also gone to a shift to community level consultations, workers, direct and indirect, as Martha pointed out, and community consultations. And so the entire methodology has shifted to the local. On the right side of the screen, we have also begun to balance out the human capital, which is available within these regions. As has been said, it's there for reskilling. Education and reskilling are vitally important. And with that, physical capital. So there's a lot of built up infrastructure in these coal regions. And as one development partner, we look very much to repurpose that physical infrastructure to attract in the private sector so that we can have economic regeneration. And then also natural capital in the form of land. So we have degraded lands. If we can remediate those environmentally, we can attract the private sector in. And that tells us the types of jobs that will be needed in the future. So this system all hangs together. Next slide, please. We have a definition for just transition. I won't go through it in detail other than to say that we really have begun to appreciate all the planning and preparation and the importance of developing transition strategies at the local level. So on a subsequent slide, I will show you how we do this comprehensive baseline mapping, planning, and preparation. But from that, we get local transition strategies, transition projects, and therefore we have to strengthen institutions and what we call the implementation capacity locally. It's so important that these things happen in and around where these assets are closing. And then, as I said before, in a bit of a change from the 1980s, 90s, and early 2000s, it's much a greater balance of public and private investments. And with our methodology, I'll show you how we're leveraging that to bring that together. Next slide, please. Martha spoke to this already. If you think of that green circle on the right, there are direct and indirect jobs, and that's where the employees and the families and a lot of the infrastructure and the environmental impacts sit. There's a circle beyond that, which are the indirect, and it's important for us to think about the contractors, the transport, logistics, small to medium enterprises, ancillary units, etc. They too will be affected by closure. And then that outer ring, which was not as well addressed, I think, in the past, which are these induced impacts. The communities, the broad revenue impacts and impacts on the delivery of social services and physical infrastructure that the mine or the coal thermal power plant might have been providing, water systems, electric systems, rail, etc. So it's so important that we pick that up also. Next slide, please. There's a lot of words here. Let me just say that we have begun a very concerted baseline mapping. And the baseline mapping looks at the coal ecosystem and all of the linkages of that coal operation, that coal mine or that thermal power plant that's closing with the broader economy. And from that, we put together blueprints or roadmaps so that we have a sense of the timing of closures. And therefore, we can adequately also estimate the cost of closures, and we can resource social programs and environmental remediation programs so that when a closure occurs, the funds and programs that are necessary are there. And as part of this baseline mapping, we're also looking at the capacity of the local communities to, and the enterprises and the workforces to effectively design strategies, transition projects, and then to launch those and be able to ensure that we have a very superior set of outcomes in terms of closures. And lastly, we look at funding mechanisms that are available in these communities today. In some places, there are funds set aside. We do not disrupt those, but rather we recognize there's a gap around these closures in terms of funding. So those programs and funds that are there, we come in to reinforce so that we have a much broader, more holistic approach in terms of adequate resourcing of what is needed for these very complex and very long-lived operations. I'll just mention that in World Bank, these operations now, we nominally start at 8 years in length, and many of them are operations go in excess of 10 years in length. So Brian, you had asked that question earlier, and so we have these very long-lived programmatic engagements. Next slide, please. This is the slide that I've been working towards. This is what's called the World Bank dashboard. We call it our 3x3. There are 3 phases: the pre-closure phase on the left, the closure, and the long-lived regional transition phase, 10 plus years, 15 years, 20 years. And then 3 columns. The first, as both Mark and Martha have mentioned, a lot of consultative processes with the labor forces, direct, indirect, and induced, the communities and other stakeholders, which includes central government functions, state, provincial, and then district level. And from that, we strengthen policies and regulations to make sure that as these assets close, they can be repurposed and that they lend themselves to regional economic transformation. So that first pillar is very much on the institutional governance. The second pillar, by definition, people and communities. This is a people-centered activity. And so we do a lot of assessment and mapping of the skills, the active labor profiles, ages, their backgrounds, the gendered impacts, all of the things that certainly Mark and Martha have both mentioned, so that we have a very clear empirical understanding of who are the impacted persons, the impacted communities, and the types of programs on education, reskilling, or community-driven development that's so absolutely important to ensure that we have a good, sustained, long-term transition. And then on the right side, environmental remediation and the repurposing of land and assets. If we can take these degraded lands and physical infrastructure and improve upon them, remediate them environmentally, we can create a public-private interface and attract in new investors that otherwise would be deterred by undue environmental risks. And if we can identify different types of industries coming in, it then tells us the types of skilling activities, as Marcia said. We know them, the type of skilling activities that we need. So Pillar 2 and Pillar 3 are very much integrated, and one supports the other. And so this Pillar 3 is this public-private space. And for many governments, we're looking at the appropriate amount of public sector funds to remediate to a brownfield site that then a private sector can certainly come in and take advantage of. So this is our 3x3 methodology. We're using it in a great many countries. It's preceded by very deep baseline mapping of all of the economic, social, and environmental linkages, as I said. And then from that, we design a very long-lived 10-plus year intervention. Next slide, please. Well, that's a map of the world. I hope everyone recognizes that. I think this is just here to say that the demand is growing, so we must all be ready. Certainly, as we go forward in the next few years, the number of engagements in countries, it will take all of us as a global development communities, our civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations, and others to really make this happen. Last slide, please. And with that, I will stop and go back to you. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you very much, Michael, and congratulations. It's such a comprehensive and inclusive approach, and it's fascinating to see. And it's fascinating to see that you've applied it in many different environments, and that leads me to a question I'd like to ask you, which is about the respective roles of lenders and funders such as yourselves in setting out these frameworks and principles and practices, and the interplay of that with national policy in the environment you're working. So how do they work together in terms of which is, say, putting it crudely, which is most important for delivering the right outcomes, or how do you make sure that they work together in a complementary way?
Thank you. We, World Bank, together with our development partners, focus very much on national closure frameworks. We find that they're quite deficient in terms of closing these assets. And what we wish to do is strengthen those closure frameworks so that when these assets close, they lend themselves to repurposing, and that they have just transition for people and community at the center, so that there's a very deep and sustained consultative process before any action is taken to close an asset. So that's number one. Number two, we're finding that there are very few countries with comprehensive roadmaps. And a roadmap allows us to understand the timing, 2023, 25, 29, 35, 40, so that when a closure is going to take place several years before that, we ensure that the programs, the social assistance and social protection and education programs and community-driven development programs are in place and that they're properly resourced. And as I said, if our experience is they're often not resourced. So that if we can resource those in advance, then when the closure takes place, the systems are not overwhelmed. And then the last point I'll just mention is that this interplay between the central government and the local, the central through the state or provincial, and then down to the district, and then down to the municipality. That's a plumbing that doesn't always work. And so we're finding that we're having to strengthen that system so that funds flow and social programs and things actually get to where they're most needed. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Michael. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us in this first session. I'm sure you'll agree we've heard from three excellent panelists and some really interesting insights. So my thanks to Martha, Mark, and Michael, and I'm sure everybody joining us today on this event joins me in thanking you. And with that, I'll close this session and hand back to our MC in Jakarta. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A very captivating discussion. Thank you for our moderator, Dr. Brian Motherway. And now let us have another round of constructive and fruitful panel discussion. It is my pleasure again to introduce our next moderator, Dr. Sripeni Intan Cahyani. Dr. Intan is expert staff on electricity to Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia. She has 7 years leadership experiences in BOD member with 27 years experience background in electricity and power generation state-owned enterprise in Indonesia. Please welcome Dr. Intan.
Thank you, Ms.
The
Alin.
session is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Alin. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from Jakarta, Indonesia. My name is Sripeni Intan Cahyani. I am expert staff for electricity to Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources of Republic of Indonesia. For during next 50 minutes, allow me to be a moderator for the panel session discussion on job and skill related with the topic ensuring people-centered transition for all. This topic actually we are going to discuss today is related with the one of the 7K principle for implementation net zero was presented by IEA on the IEA COP26 net zero summit on the end of the March 2021. That's people-centered transition are morally required and political necessary. Let me read a note of the IEA for the one of the key principles for implementing net zero. As a country seeks to advance their shift to clean energy technology, the success of this effort will rest on enabling citizens to benefit from transition opportunity to navigate disruption. These include social, environmental, and economic impact on individual and community, as well as issue of affordability and fairness. A focus on training and skill development to equip all citizens to participate in the net zero common economy is also critical. Government should continue to share best practices and, where useful, explore and step up new ways of sharing best practices for designing climate neutral energy policy that are people-centered, are inclusive, including as part of IEA Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transition. So, today we have 5 special with experts in this field, which will share their experience in best practice manners, share their thoughts and opinions. Allow me introduce them and describe short their biography. The first panelist is Ms. Lebogang Mulaisi. She is the Labor Market Policy Coordinator at COSATU. COSATU is Congress of South Africa Trade Unions, where she coordinates COSATU labor's market policy implementation as well as the just transition to low carbon. She is also the commissioners on the Presidential Climate Change Coordinating Commission. Ms. Lebogang recently contributed a chapter, the latest MISTRA publication, titled A Just Transition to a Low Carbon Future in South Africa. Good morning, Mr. Lebogang. Ms. Lebogang, nice to meet you.
Thank you, program moderator.
Let me continue to introduce other panelists first. Second panelist is Ms. Adela Tesarova. She is head of unit for Customers, Local Initiative Just Transition in Directorate General Energy of European Commissions. She is an economist with experience in the European Commission, working on energy, climate, and environment policy, as well as EU economic government and taxation. She also worked in PricewaterhouseCoopers Prague before joining the Commission. Good morning, Ms. Adela. Nice to meet you.
Good morning, good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you. So I continue to the third panelist is Mr. Frederick Moh. Mr. Frederick Moh is head of the Structural, Industrial, and Services Policy Department at the German Trade Union Confederation, or DGB, in Berlin. Until 2019, he was a lecturer at the Berlin School of the Economic and Law. And before joining the DGB, he was working in the policy area at the German Solar Association. Mr. Frederick, how do you do?
Selamat malam. Good afternoon.
Yes, good afternoon. And the fourth panelist is Mrs. Siti Kustiati. She is representing Mr. Bambang Satrio Lilono, Head of Manpower Planning and Development Agency, Ministry of Manpower Indonesia. She has Master Science from University of Indonesia. She is Head of Planning Center at the Ministry of Manpower, and before current position, she was Director of Internship Program. She has 34 years experience in dealing with manpower. It is very related with the topic today we discuss and have important tasks for her involved on the support in the energy transition in Indonesia. Selamat sore Ibu Siti, apa kabar Ibu?
Selamat sore Ibu Inten, good afternoon.
Thank you Ibu. And the last panelist is Mr. Hendra Sinadia. Mr. Hendra Sinadia is Executive Director of Indonesia Coal Mining Association since 2017. And before, he was as Executive Secretary of the Indonesia Mining Association, or IMA. He has experience in the mining industry more than 17 years and started his career at the Freeport Indonesia, and also he get achievement as a President Director of Vale Explorasi Indonesia, a subsidiary of Vale International, and now he is currently as the Vice Chairman of Indonesia Mining Institute. Prior to work in the mining industry, Mr. Hendra worked as a senior legal consultant at the Prasetyo Utomo Consult. Good afternoon, Pak Hendra.
Good afternoon, Bu Inten. Selamat sore. I'll get back to you later. Open the camera in few minutes. Thank you, Bu.
Okay, thank you. That's all the short biography of the all special panelists today, and each of the panelists will have 7 minutes to share their experience, their thoughts, and after that we have 10 until 15 minutes to discuss question and answer. So let me start with the first panelist, Ms. Lebogang from Cosatu, South Africa. You have 7 minutes, Mr. Lebogang, and we would like to have and hear your thought, your experience in the South Africa. Time is yours.
Thank you, program moderator, and thank you for the invitation to come and do a presentation on some of the insights from South Africa. I think this is a very important subject matter. You know, ensuring a people-centered transition for all, I think, is a great imperative across broader society, and especially from the context of, you know, developing and emerging economies, especially one such as South Africa, emerging from a devastating pandemic and experiencing low growth and significant job losses over the years, having one of the highest unemployment rates that we've ever had, the imperatives around transitioning, but in a manner that ensures that, no one is left behind is really important and is very timeless, in fact. This reaffirms the trade union position around leaving nobody behind, primarily around, not wanting communities and workers to be left behind and to fall through the cracks as we get into a process of what potentially is the structural transformation of our economy. So I think we, as particularly in the trade union movement, appreciate, such a broad acceptance of these imperative concepts. I think, when we talk about, transitions, especially to a low carbon economy, the issue of jobs is so pertinent. I think it's top of mind when people think about transitioning to a low carbon economy. What will happen to the jobs that we currently see? In all honesty, and I think this is the case for South Africa, the mining and energy sector over the years, due to automation and mechanization, has already started to shrink over the years. And, the idea of jobs and job creation is something that's so top of mind, especially in the context of such high unemployment and high inequality. One job lost, I think, is definitely one too many. But we have an opportunity here. And I think this is how we in the trade union movement in South Africa look at a transition to a low carbon economy, a people-centered transition, a just transition, that we have an opportunity here by being proactive in our policy interventions, being proactive in our interactions between various stakeholders. We have the opportunity to make sure that, in the process of transitioning our economy, we can take workers, we can take communities along with us. I think the broader idea here, especially in the context of high unemployment, is to ensure that those who have never meaningfully participated in the economy previously can have an opportunity to participate within the context of a just transition to a low carbon economy. So this means the participation of the youth, this means participation of women, this means participation of various other groupings in society that have not been able to meaningfully participate in the economy due to various historical reasons, especially in our society, relating to pre-democracy ways in which governance took place in South Africa. We've found in this work that we've done, especially around people-centered transitions and a just transition, we found that the debate and all of the empirical analysis is always around this issue around job displacement. It's a serious consideration because if a transition is not handled properly, you do run the risk of having huge numbers of people displaced from their jobs, and without any plan to reskill, any plans on how to ensure comprehensive social security, you have the potential to experience catastrophic job displacement. And I think a concept that is often not talked about, and I think it's up to the trade union movement to really echo these sentiments, and we're doing this through various publications, is to talk about the future of the labor market within a low carbon economy. And what that means for our society. A transition is disruptive in nature. And I know it becomes, we might want to focus on, having simplistic, diagrammatic ways of explaining a transition. But to be quite honest, that transition is disruptive in nature. And it does have potential impacts to have a disruption in the way that the labor market has historically been run. But what the nice thing about it is that once we start to think about these issues early on in the process of transitioning, we have the opportunity to be able to address those transitions, circumvent them, and create opportunities for workers and communities where opportunities previously were not there. So as we think about the labor market, as we think about sectors in the manner in which sectors currently look like, we need to also start to think about the future of particular sectors. And I think at the first instance, we need to talk about, the mining and energy sector, because this seems to be the sector that is in imminent need to transition. Rethink about that sector, how that sector currently looks, the labor dynamics of that particular sector, and how those can potentially be impacted by a transition to a low carbon economy. In some of our thinking around some of our policy interventions, what we've sponsored there is that, especially the mining and energy sector. If we're going to talk about leaving nobody behind in a transition, and people who are currently working in this sector are probably going to find themselves in a situation where they have to transition out of the sector. We need to make use of current labor market institutions in order to ensure the decent work agenda within this particular sector. We do this by making use of collective bargaining. We believe in the centrality of collective bargaining institutions because they currently have already in place institutions where employers and workers come together and negotiate for working conditions. So we believe that this is a key instrument in the sector to ensure that we can continue to ensure that there is a seamless transition of workers without displacing workers and without weakening their labor market wins and their labor standards within the particular sector, and to ensure that they continue to enjoy the benefits of collective bargaining gains. But equally, we ensure that the decent work agenda remains central to the transition pathways that workers will be following. So we believe in the centrality of collective bargaining. On the issue of skills, we reaffirm the need for there to be skilling and upskilling. But we think that the issue of skills can't be looked at in isolation. Yes, reskilling is going to be of pertinent importance. We're going to have to ensure that we skill workers. In the South African case, if you look at the mining and energy sector, to a large extent, those workers have very low skills. And the transition will probably require that there be a significant level of upskilling. So this idea around, putting in efforts in order to audit workers and audit their skill level in order to identify what the skills gap is going to be so that you can begin the work of reskilling those workers and designing, fit for purpose training programs that will be able to develop those workers to be able to adapt to alternative industries is going to be important. But the issue of skilling can't be looked at in isolation. We're going to have to look at this in conjunction with bringing in comprehensive social security nets and also bringing in this fundamental idea of financing, especially when it comes to, filling in the skills gap. Financing is going to be of critical importance. And this is either going to be from, the private sector through big business, or this is also going to have to fall to a large extent onto, the macroeconomic framework, and the state is going to have to provide a large amount of funding in order to ensure that we get the skills right and we can fill the skills gap effectively to ensure that, we can effectively upskill and reskill workers that are needing to be upskilled in order to adapt to alternative industries. Program moderator, my time is up, so I think I'll hand back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Libogang. And it is very interesting talking your experience. Particularly, I have take some note from you regarding with the work together, not people behind, not job loss, job creation, and also the sector. The sector priority that have an impact is the mine energy sector. Okay, so we continue first to the second panelist is Ms. Adela Tesarova from Directorate General Energy of European Commissions. Your time is 7 minutes, Ms. Adela. So time is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to those on the European time. So thank you very much for the invitation. I will briefly present the experience of the European Union. The European Commission works very closely with the International Energy Agency on promoting the topic of just transition globally, and we are happy to be part of the initiative on just and fair people-centered transition. So when it comes to the EU, we have our strategy to decarbonize, to get to net zero, is called the European Green Deal. And the European Green Deal is also our recovery strategy to recover from the COVID pandemic. And we strongly believe that decarbonization will create the necessary investments and the necessary jobs for Europe to recover back from the economic crisis that the pandemic brought to us as well. And just transition is a firm pillar of the European Green Deal, because we also believe that the issue of displacements of jobs and job losses have to be addressed up front, and that in fact the decarbonization is an opportunity, not only a potential threat to fairness in society. It is of course clear that decarbonization will bring changes, will bring distributional impacts, and it is therefore essential not to leave anyone behind. At the same time, we also believe that there are pre-existing inequalities in the society. And in fact, the decarbonization can help addressing these. To give you a few examples, decarbonization can bring much safer, more sustainable, and actually more skilled jobs than are the current jobs in the mining industry, as my predecessor also mentioned. The industrial processes we would like to introduce to our industries, moving away from fossil fuels, are again much cleaner, more IT, more high-tech, require higher skills from the workers. And so we see this also as an opportunity. In addition, at the green energy or decarbonization can also resolve the problem of energy poverty, which we have a lot of it in Europe. Which means people cannot pay the energy bills, but these are fossil fuel bills. So if we help people get to clean energy, which is much cheaper, more affordable, better available, we will resolve also problem of fossil fuel poverty. So this is to give you a few examples. Then the green transition is not only creating new distributional problems, but can also resolve pre-existing distributional inequalities which we have in the society. As part of the European Green Deal, we have set up a just transition mechanism with which we focus on the carbon-intensive regions and sectors, and we are helping them invest in new job opportunities, in reskilling and upskilling of workers, so that in the process of decarbonization, we don't create new job losses. So we are, in the first step, we concentrate on regions that are dependent on coal mining or use of coal in the power sector, but we also concentrate on energy-intensive industries where we need to see change in the industrial processes to move away from fossil fuels as well. So green hydrogen and so on. But the starting point, as everywhere else, is indeed phase out of coal and what this means for the society and the economy. And we are really concentrating very much on the skills improvement, so reskilling and upskilling of the workers, but also new education and training opportunities for those entering the labor market, new job opportunities, startups, helping entrepreneurship develop in these regions, new types of economic activities. But we also have quite good results with reskilling mining workers for the green energy sectors. For example, wind energy industry is very active, for example, in the Polish coal mining regions, because there are big opportunities for former coal miners to work in offshore or onshore wind energy. We also invest a lot in land repurposing, again, very often away from coal use to green energy. And last comment I would like to make in this context is the importance of both top-down and bottom-up working methods. Top-down means there is an NDC, and this NDC is then translated in concrete measures, and one of them is coal phase-out date as a starting point. So there is a governmental commitment to phase out coal from mining, from the power use, as we have heard from some others before, gradual phase out, so no new power plants, and gradual phase out of the existing ones. But this also needs to be accompanied by a bottom-up approach, meaning engagement of the local actors And this we have been doing for a number of years already, really starting from the relevant regions, when the employees and employers come together, the regional authorities, the local authorities come together, NGOs, trade unions, and they basically design a new economic strategy for the region. So this is absolutely essential, because the coal phase out cannot be done only with a top-down way. You need to have the local actors on board. They have to be part of the process. And that's something we very much do in the EU. We have set up a so-called platform for just transition, or before we called it Coal Regions and Transition Platform. And we work very closely with the local actors. And I think this is really the essence for any success, because these processes will of course take a while. They will not happen overnight. And so having everyone on board and starting both from top down and bottom up so that we can meet in the middle is absolutely essential. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Adela. Actually, you still have 1 minute, but I would like to explore more regarding with this. You said about it is interesting regarding with how to balance the top down from the government and also the commitment from the government with the top down scenario, top down approach, and also the bottom up engagement from the employee and the society. So it is so the person in charge for this. You said that this is like a platform or a community.
Well,
1 minute.
we as the EU, we provide a platform to allow this type of actors come together. But at the same time, this is happening also at national level, of course. So an EU platform is not a replacement for these actors coming together directly in the region and working together the new development strategy, and engaging the employees and the employers and the trade unions and the region and the city and the NGOs and so on. Yeah. So to facilitate the process, we have.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Adela. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, so I have this is interesting what Ms. Adela shared her experience regarding with this community to the top down and bottom up. So let me continue to the third panelist. For the third panelist, I would like to invite Mr. Frederick, Mr. Frederick Mo from German Trade Union Confederation. You have time 7 minutes, and please. Mr. Frederick, you have 7 minutes.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon again, and thank you for inviting me to this great panel discussion. Just let me introduce with some short words the DGB. The DGB is the umbrella organization of the trade unions in Germany, covering around 6 million members in all sectors of the industry and also in the private and public service sectors. I would like to give you a brief overview of the work of the Coal Commission, of the recommendations of the Coal Commission, which was already mentioned in the panel before. And I'd like to give you some of the ideas of how this coal exit is organized in Germany. So the DGB is working very intensively on all of these topics of energy transition and climate change, and the DGB was part of this co-commission in 2019, which prepared the coal phase out in Germany with a final report after a half year of working of this Commission. And the coal exit in Germany is based on three big points. The first point is that the whole phase-out process is made in a socially responsible way, and this coal phase-out is very close to checkpoints and not a shutdown logic. So it is necessary for sure to have a big expansion of renewable energies, of the electricity grids, and this is brought together with the whole path of this coal exit. The second point is that there is a high level of protection of the workers in the coal sector. Means that there is some kind of early retirement program for the older workers, that there are qualification programs for the younger workers, and collective bargaining is the core for all these social measures. So if a company wants to shut down a power plant, it is necessary that there is a collective agreement on how to deal with the workers of that power plant. And the third point is that we have a high amount of public funding for structural policy, for new perspectives, for new economical ideas in the coal regions to bring new jobs, new decent jobs, and new value creation into the regions. For example, with hydrogens or other industrial sectors which are related to the energy transition, for example. In 2020, all these ideas of the report came into two laws in Germany, and the coal phase-out was fixed until the date of 2038, and especially if this whole path is very successful, it could be 3 years earlier, in 2035. And we have a Structural Enhancement Act which secures the structural aid for the coal regions with an amount of 40 billion euro for a period of time of 20 years. And I'd like to compare it with the gross added value of the lignite sector. It's around 4 billion euros per year. So you can see that there is a relation between the public funding and the economical impact of the lignite industry in Germany. In 2021, so last year, we got new climate targets in Germany, and this brought the new government we have now to the point that they are discussing an acceleration of the coal phase out, but for the moment it is unclear because of the war in the Ukraine and all the impacts on the energy supply in Central Europe. But let me come to a very important point, and this is the workers' participation. From the DGB's point of view, the workers' participation is very crucial for the success of such a just transition process, and that is why we said that beside the collective bargaining and beside the co-determination we have in Germany, it is important to bring in the workers into the debates in the regions on how to develop the regions in the next years. And that is why the DGB initiates a big project which is funded by our Ministry of Economical Affairs, and we established 6 project offices in the coal regions supporting the workers and the works councils in this process of this coal phase out. And I think I'd like to share with you what these offices are doing. They provide some kind of knowledge transfer, they strengthen the networking in the regions, and they try to consult and qualify the workers and the works councils and the trade unions activists in the regions to play a constructive and a progressive role in that structural change we are facing. Yeah, maybe some key points what we've learned from that process. So the first point is that workers are the key to the transition. With their knowledge, they are able to be a strong supporter of the innovation in such a transition process. It is necessary to strengthen the social dialogue, to strengthen collective agreements, and to make workers be a part of that transition process. It is necessary, and that's the second point, that no one is left behind. It was mentioned before, and I want to underline it. It is so crucial, and that means that we need to have a very high level of social security. The third point is that we have a political framework which is clear and which is guiding us into the carbon neutral century. And for sure, the fourth point, it's all about investments. So it's necessary to mobilize public and private investments into a carbon neutral economy. And as a closing remark, I'd like to say that it's not about setting goals anymore. It's about taking action worldwide. And we will only fight together the climate change, or we will fail. And we are convinced that international cooperation is so crucial for a just transition, which is people-centered. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Frederick. It's very interesting. I take some notes regarding with your experience, particularly for the retirement coal power plant. Yeah, you have a 7 project that DGP having. The project to support for workers for the processing of the coal phase out. I think it is very crucial and it is very interesting, and it is related with the emerging country that have a coal power plant itself. And so the set goals, it is important also, and workers is the key important, strengthen the social dialogues. Okay, thank you, Frederick. Thanks. So we are going to continue to the next panelist is Ibu Siti Kustiati from Planning Center Ministry of Manpower of Republic of Indonesia. Ibu Siti, you have time 7 minutes.
Thank you, Ibu Intan. Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. As we know, my presentation, please. Next slide, please. As we know, manpower development in our country is increasingly complex with various labor issues such as demographic bonus, COVID-19 and Industrial Revolution 4.0 and energy transition. Next slide, please. Based on the data BP Statistical Review of World Energy 2021, Indonesia is the 3rd largest coal producer in the world, and we become the largest coal producing country in ASEAN. Energy transition challenge in Indonesian manpower development, considering that the labor absorption in the mining sector is quite large. Next slide, please. There are 4 provinces that have the most coal production. Operating permits are East Kalimantan, Central Kalimantan, South Kalimantan, and South Sumatra. The workforce working in 12 mining companies in Kalimantan province include the following fields, like management field, production process, and support activity. Next slide, please. To facing that issue, Ministry of Manpower, Republic of Indonesia, collaborating with Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, developed the increased estimation of workforce needs in the mining and excavation sector. There are the 74 increasing occupation. Next slide, please. At the level manager, professional technician, and professional assistant, administrative staff, service worker, and sales personnel, processing craft, machine operator, and assembler, blue-collar workers. Next slide, please. There is the detail of the occupational for the increase. Next slide, please. And that are the decreased occupational. There are 8 occupational decrease at the level professional, technician, and professional assistant, processing, craft, and machine operator and assembler. Next slide, please. There are a detail of decrease in 8 occupational. Next slide. The increasing estimation of workforce need covers the entire mining sector, but it is not specifically related to the clean energy due to unavailability of the data. Next slide, please. There are policy of manpower development to accelerate national development. Next slide, please. The development goals, as well as to face the complexities of manpower development, challenged by optimism, strength, and improving existing weakness. The Minister of Manpower has announced 9 Great Labs in manpower development for 2020 until 2024. Next slide. Relating with policy direction 9 labs of the Ministry of Manpower relating to the energy transformation, but it's one BLK transformation. The transfer BLK in revolutionary way into vocational and productivity training center as a center that for competency development and competitive workforce productivity both at the national and international level. And then lab number 2, link and match, build the integration of training, certification, and placement of workers in an integrated, effective, and efficient business process to bring the job seeker with the demand of the job market. Next slide, please. And the lip is number 9. Number 6, the new vision of industrial relation, develop a more productive and fair industrial relation as well as being oriented towards improving the competence and welfare of the workforce in sustainable manner. I think to do the energy transition, we have some priority to do, such as identify workforce need for future jobs. Ministry of Manpower will be coordinating with Ministry of Energy and Research, Mineral Research to identify workforce needs for future jobs, and to develop competency standard for clean energy, and then develop training need analysis, and implement training and certification and placement. I think if we do the priority, we can do energy transition smoothly for the skilled worker. I think this is my priority, our priority to do the energy transition. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to join this webinar.
Thank you,
Thank you, Ibu Inten.
Thank you, Ibu Siti. Ibu Siti has already described the direction and strategy. There are 9 strategies that have already mentioned, and also having the priorities for the Minister of the Manpower of Indonesia, how to mitigate of the energy transition, particularly in the coal mining sector. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to inform you that it is fortunately the Mr. Pandu Patria Syahrir can join to this seminar. So the last panelist is Mr. Pandu Patria Syahrir. Mr. Pandu Patria Syahrir is, I would like to say the brief of biography, the chairman of the Indonesia Coal Mining Association, and he is now Vice President Director of TBS Energi Utama, leading energy company in Indonesia, and also become Director of Electrum, a joint venture company. He also head of Financial Technology in Indonesia Chamber, or Kadin. Mr. Pandu Patria Syahrir, you have 7 minutes to deliver your experience and opinion. Time is yours.
Halo Ibu. Halo Ibu.
Silahkan.
Thank you for the time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for spending your afternoon or morning, your time about this topic of energy transition. Just to give you a little bit of background, APDI, ICMA, the Indonesian Coal Mining Association, comprises of 95% of the total coal production in Indonesia. Today is probably the largest export value for the country, especially given the recent rise of prices this past 12 months. Moving forward, I think we've stated for the last 12 months, we followed the footprint of the Indonesian government, where all of us are using the cash flow that we produce and are replacing the EBITDA or the revenue coming from the carbon, from the coal business, moving into those that can offset carbon. So, you know, for most of the major players, I think the biggest players in coal mining today have transitioned into following the government roadmap, where we want to become in 2060 net zero carbon. For our business, TBS Energy, we've already announced by 2030 that we will net zero carbon, and the way we're doing it is by phasing out our coal business. We have reinvested into this joint venture we did with Goto, which is the largest technology company in this country. But we will do a 2-wheeler electric vehicle business, an end-to-end ecosystem, which we call Electrum. A couple of weeks ago, we were fortunate to be hosted when the president opened the JV along with Argentina. And we hope that this is a good first step for our society to transition into a friendlier ecosystem for renewable energy. So that's probably our big first step. Number 2, we are investing into renewable energy meaningfully. So those 2 businesses will be the pillar of our company. Lastly, in terms of manpower, the only thing I can comment, we are in a transition period. To become renewable will take longer than a decade. It's a multi-decade effort for all of us. So the most important tool for the younger people, because obviously we're doing it not just for us here, all the participants that are here today, but we're also doing it for our children, for our grandkids, right? For some of those that are older. This is the future, right? And whatever we're doing today is will be for them, right? So the movement to renewable energy is a multi-decade effort. It is not overnight, and we need to have the intent and also the effort. So probably, last comment from a manpower perspective, for all of us, the audience, it's important to upgrade our knowledge, upgrade skill set, because the market is now changing, and there is a strong direction by the Indonesian government to move into a net zero carbon world. I'll stop there. I'm not going to take the entire 7 minutes. I think that's enough, and hopefully it's clear, and we can go to Q&A. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Pak Pandu. I think it's very important. So from the Indonesia Coal Mining Association perspective, it is good to start for the renewable energy business, I think. Okay, and ladies and gentlemen, so we are all of the 5 special panelists already share their experience, their talk, and their opinion. And so we will continue the discussion session. So we have 10 minutes, yeah, we have 10 minutes. We inform you that IEA has collected the issue in the topics that is already collected by IEA, and there are several questions that already set to the panelists. There are 4 questions, so I would like to explain the question, and I will ask several panelists to share what is their opinion. The question number 1, how do you do ensure clean energy transition deliver diverse and good quality job opportunity? I would like to invite Ms. Lebogang and Ibu Siti. I think you can share your opinion regarding with this. How do you ensure clean energy transition deliver diverse and good quality job opportunity?
Thanks, program moderator. I think that's a very important question. I think in my input I'd already indicated that transitions are sector-wide and stakeholder-wide. It has far-reaching consequences for all sectors. So it becomes very important through social dialogue to bring impacted and key stakeholders together. Through either social compact. In South Africa, what we've done is the establishment of the Presidential Climate Change Coordinating Commission, where it brings together these various stakeholders together in order to plan for the transition. I think what's very important is, if well coordinated and well aligned planning for this transition, and a plan that can be agreed to with fundamental principles already agreed to in the planning process, and the creation of transition and just transition frameworks for the country. So I think what's been very important for us is how well we've brought together very diverse stakeholders together to agree on the principles, firstly, of the transition, and agreeing that at the heart of it is bringing people together, leaving nobody behind, and the impetus around job creation and the decent work agenda. And by agreeing to those principles, then it makes the planning of the framework express those key principles within it. And that's how we get, I think, the job creation imperative right within the transition to a low carbon economy.
Thank you. Thank you. Ibu Siti, if you have any share or opinion to this question.
In order to prepare the job opportunities, the government must participate in preparing competent workforce through training in various institutions such as job training centers managed by government and job training centers managed by private sector. The preparation of workforce must be started from the development process for the maintenance. Based on this condition, thousands of people estimate will be absorbed in this sector. Moreover, other sectors such as transportation, it will switch to electric vehicle, both electric cars and electric motorcycle. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Siti. So the competency and training job and also involving the private sector. Thank you. So the question number 2, what are the key success ingredients of clean energy transition, maximizing local job creation while ensuring social protection? So for this question, I would like to invite Mr. Frederick. Mr. Frederick, could you give us the opinion about this?
Thank you for this important question. So, I mean, when it comes to a transition on the regional level, it is necessary to have a clear perspective of the further development of a region. And this is very close to the target to ensure that new decent jobs are created. So, I mean, when it comes to public subsidies, for example, for companies to develop new economic structures, to develop new economical things in a region, it is necessary that these companies are committed to the ILO labor standards and are committed to social dialogue and collective bargaining. I mean, it is necessary that new decent jobs in the green sector are qualified jobs and are good jobs for the workers, and the workers can take place in that transition process. And from a union's point of view, it is necessary that the knowledge of the workers can be used in that process of shaping the transition. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Frederick. So the clear perspective and clear goal, I think it is necessary. Thank you. So the question number 3 is, have you seen good example of clean energy transition strategically designed to maximize opportunity for new good quality job? So I would like to invite Ms. Adela. Could you please share your opinion?
Thank you. Well, we believe that jobs related to green energy are certainly much better quality and more sustainable, and actually more skills demanding than jobs related to fossil energy. But of course, as I said in my intervention, not all jobs that have to be created to kind of reposition or re-engage workers currently working in coal, mining, coal power, not all of these jobs will of course be in industry. Yeah, will be in energy. So it is clear that some of these workers will be able to find jobs in the green energy sectors, including energy efficiency, construction, production of materials, and so on. Solar maintenance of solar panels like those behind me on the screen, or installation maintenance of wind turbines and production of wind turbines, and so on. But not all of the jobs will be in green energy. So some of the jobs will be in completely different types of industries, as some of the speakers also mentioned, tourism, or completely different types of industries. We're also promoting setup of new businesses, startups. It can be IT jobs. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adela. So the last question is, what are best practice for placing social dialogue in the heart of the just transition? So I would like to invite Pak Pandu, Mr. Pandu, so you could share your opinion. Best practices for placing social dialogue.
I think this is one of the forums to do it. A lot of this is engagement, because as part of our stakeholder engagement, to have open communication on this type of issue. Obviously, some of the things we're discussing are forward-looking. Now, with respect to what's happening today, honestly, we're going through a war. What is happening today between Russia and Ukraine has created significant pressure globally, even in coal. Coal is at an all-time high today, and I think it will get higher soon. There's going to be news out coming in the next 24 hours that makes coal higher, that will make oil much higher. So in very short term, we also have to realize, even though Indonesia in the short term benefit from the increase of these prices, in the medium term, I think this is going to have an adverse effect globally, because at the end, the consumers and everyday person have to pay for it in the form of high energy prices. My biggest worry, if you want to talk about just, is inflation that is happening. My big worry that this may be even as scary as March 2020 when we had COVID. The separation between the haves and have-nots can become increasingly significant because of the rising prices of energy and inflation. You'll see it across Western Europe immediately, and even here in Indonesia too. So I think for all of us, I know we're talking about the future, and I really appreciate that we're having this conversation. In the very short term, all of us should also be aware that we got to help each other out, right? What is happening today with respect to energy crisis happening all across Europe is something we citizens are deeply worried and watching. And I know that, we'll try to be helpful as much as we can. And I think this is a good time to have this discussion, how we can be helpful to one another, especially the fact that this is part of a larger event of G20. All the 20 countries should be united, especially given the turmoil happening today. I just want to end at that note, because your question is so difficult amidst what is going on, what is happening today. I don't want to just look into Indonesia, what's happening globally today. But you want to talk about just society, the time to do action is actually right now, right? Especially as energy players, we got to help each other out. So anyway, Dr. Sri Penny, I think, let's look at what's happening now and see how we can be helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Pandu. So, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this panel discussion. So I'm very appreciate and thank you all special panelists with have shared their valuable opinions, such as, and also to give enrichment for us to understand what we should to do mitigate and anticipate the risk and overcome the issue on the people-centered in just and equitable energy transition. So I take some notes for the conclusion from this session. So first is each country have their respective and unique challenging and need in transitioning their energy system to be cleaner and more sustainable, and need to set up the roadmap on people-centered focus. Second, just an equitable transition towards sustainable energy will require supporting and readiness of people-centered to overcome the shifting of job, skill, and technology adoption. It is need system, infrastructure, and collaboration with top-down approach and bottom-up involvement with the society to make effective. And also, it is need social and public dialogue. And the last one is new skill, capacity, and job creation and expertise should be domestically developed to support the transformational process, and needed best practices perspective to expedite the process of transition. So thank you, Ms. Lebogang, Ms. Adela, Mr. Frederick, Ibu Siti Kustiati, and Bapak Pandu for joining to the panelists today. And we hope you all safe, happy, and success. Thank you. We'll give back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the insightful discussion, Dr. Intan. We really appreciate it. And ladies and gentlemen, at this time, I would like again to invite Dr. Brian Mathaway to deliver his closing remarks. Please welcome Dr. Brian Mathaway.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alina. And thank you very much, Ibu Sri Penny, for that excellent panel discussion. And all the panelists, I must say, it was very enjoyable and educational and uplifting to hear these different perspectives from different parts of the world, reminding us of the importance of these issues, but also some of the really excellent work that's going on in many regions and many countries. And it does remind me of the experience we have had here at the IEA in the last year, working with the Global Commission for People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions, that there is really excellent experience being garnered around the world and much to learn from each other, which of course is what today's event is about. And I do want to thank Minister Tasrif and his team in particular, not just for their leadership in the G20 presidency, but also for his personal participation in the Global Commission in the last year. And again, to thank Pa Yudu and Pa Dadan and all of the colleagues who have been taking on such a great leadership role in the G20 and for highlighting this issue in particular. I want to say that the IEA is ready to continue working with all G20 members and beyond, and of course with our fellow international organizations, including those represented in the meeting here today. I think we can clearly see that this is a very important issue, and I think the real message for me today is, while we're talking about transitions that will take many years and many decades, the time is to start is now, and we need to learn from the experiences now. We need to accelerate progress, but make sure that we do that in a truly people-centered and inclusive way. And we look forward to working with you all, and we're delighted to have been able to collaborate with the Indonesian G20 presidency on today's event. Thank you very much, and back to you.
Thank you very much. Please give a huge applause for Dr. Brian Mathaway. Thank you very much for your insightful speech and also continued support. Looking forward to working together with you, Dr. Brian Mathaway. And now, lastly, I would also like to hear from Dr. Prahoro Nurcahyo, Co-Chair ETWG Indonesia, Head of Human Resources Development Agency for Energy and Mineral Resources, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia. Please welcome Dr. Prahoro Nurcahyo to deliver his closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Brian. All distinguished speakers and participants, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. Good afternoon from Jakarta, actually. It is my pleasure to conclude this insightful webinar. In today's webinar, we have been sailing through three main sessions. The first one, we can call it the opening. The second one is about the international analysis. And the third one is about the G20 perspective. In the opening, we can obtain the common understanding from the G20 Troika this year, and then we have a common awareness that people-centered energy transitions have to be at the main concerns, addressing the widening range of issues on gaps of doing the transitions among groups of the countries and on energy poverty. These concerns are actually well acknowledged within the three priorities of G20 Indonesia presidency: accessibility, technology, and financing. From the international analysis sections, we could collect the findings on how just energy transitions demonstrate their international dimensions. At the global level, just energy transitions provide the ideal of transforming towards sustainable energy, such as enhancing the NDCs, creating green jobs and decent works, improving industrial value chains, shifting skills and expertise, and mobilizing for more finance and incentive for sustainable transitions and climate efforts. Prior to this year G20 presidency, the IEA's Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions, of which Minister Tasrif is a member, has brought this issue to the forefront of the international energy policy agenda. The Global Commissions enable members to collectively draw on recent experiences and best practices from around the world to identify a set of actionable recommendations. All participants in today's workshop recognize the importance of these issues and that governments around the world can enact clean energy policies designed with people-centered and just transitions approaches. To that end, the value of international dialogue and exchange of best practice cannot be underestimated, including through this year's G20 energy agenda. As we look forward to the G20 energy ministerial and beyond, and as we shape the action plan for the global deal on energy transitions, Indonesia would like to mainstream and integrate people-centered transitions as a key cross-cutting theme within each of our priority areas: access, technology, and finance. From the last session, we could collect the practical challenges and insights through policy actions, policy practices, and experiences from actors and sectors in the national levels who are situated at the front lines of the implementing just energy transitions. First, countries have their respective challenges and needs in transitioning their energy system to be cleaner and more sustainable. The existing energy structures and systems, from infrastructures to the established organizational systems, should be continuously transformed and readjusted to respond to global challenges and support the process of energy transition. Second, just and equitable transitions towards sustainable energy will require huge amount of financing. This challenge is multiplied by the situations and the international communities which is recovering from the global pandemic of COVID-19, bringing around 150 million global populations into poverty line. In this significance, countries, either poor, developing, or developed, will try their best effort to prioritize the socio-economic burdens of their people. The transition's impact must be well mitigated for the benefit of broader public and protect vulnerable communities. Third, just energy transition will require the change and shift on technologies, jobs, and other economic opportunities. New skills, capacities, and expertise should be domestically developed to support the transformational processes. Meanwhile, accessibility toward sustainable energy must be secure for its availability, affordability, and reliability. These transitions, however, also enable opportunities to achieve sustainable recovery and also greener and more inclusive economy. If people-centered energy transitions can be done smoothly, new opportunities such as jobs and other prospects will be created and will support global recovery. Moving forward, we are planning to amplify the recommendations, practices, and experiences on people-centered energy transitions in strengthening the key deliverables of G20 ETWG in ministerial level. Hopefully, this necessity could also be promoted to G20's leaders level as an integral part of G20 comprehensive exit strategy to support recovery. I do hope we could see you again in the next webinar series of G20 Indonesia's Energy Transition Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prahoro Nurcahyo, for your eye-opening speech. Thank you. So see you again then for the next agenda. So huge round of applause to all wonderful speakers and moderators for today. I would also like to extend sincere thanks to all participants and attendees. Please kindly find the event materials from the link provided on the chat box. I'm Aline Bratmaja. Stay safe and see you again in next agenda. Bye.
Indonesia, with its diverse culture and natural resources, has made this country able to stand on its own feet. Even though still struggling, its rich nature gives the energy to stand strong again. The power of energy in Indonesia is spread in all corners of the country, starting from oil and gas, coal mineral, electricity, renewable energy to geology. After 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic in Indonesia, a feeling of despair can truly be felt, but everything must go back to normal. Energy retainers continue to be committed to meeting domestic energy needs amid the pandemic. Investment of $282 billion or 107% from 2020. Non-tax revenue reached 189.2 rupiah or about 156% from the target of 121.2 trillion rupiah. Energy subsidy amounting 131.5 trillion rupiah consists of subsidies for fuel and LPG of 83.7 trillion rupiah and electricity of 47.8 trillion rupiah. The transfer management of the Rokan block, the largest oil block in Indonesia, from PT Chevron Pacific Indonesia to Pertamina. Ease of investment and incentives to encourage the achievement of the oil production target of 1 million barrels of oil per day and 12 billion standard cubic feet per day of natural gas by 2030. The gas utilization for domestic use in 2021 is 66% higher than the portion for export. 799,000 households are connected to the city gas network. 331 locations for one price of Indonesian fuel. 98.24% coal production from the target of 625 million tons. The realization of mineral refining facilities amounting to 21 smelters. Reclamation of ex-mining land reaches 8,539 hectares from the target of 7,025 hectares. The development of the volcano monitoring system in 4 locations. The implementation of geological mapping of volcanoes in 5 locations. Mapping the earthquake-prone disaster areas in one map. Mapping the ground movement vulnerability zones for 5 locations. The installation of a landslide early warning system in 3 locations. Installed power plant capacity of 74 gigawatt. Installed capacity of 11.152 megawatt new renewable energy power plant. Realization of the new renewable energy mix of 13.5%, an increase from the target of 12.9%. 99.62% electrification ratio for villages. Utilization of domestic biodiesel of 9.3 million kiloliter with foreign exchange savings of 66.54 trillion rupiah. Lowering carbon dioxide emissions by 69.5 million tons. 267 general electric vehicle charging stations in 224 locations. 266 units general electric vehicle battery exchange stations in 265 locations. The conversion of 100 fuel motorcycles to electric motorcycle conversions.
Di Indonesia sendiri sebetulnya kita memiliki kekuatan yang sangat besar mengenai renewable energy ini. 418 gigawatt, baik itu dari hydropower, geothermal, Bayu, solar panel, biofuel, arus bawah laut, dan yang lain-lainnya. Potensinya sangat besar sekali.
Currently, the government is committed to reaching the fulfillment of net zero emissions or NZE by 2060 or sooner. Therefore, innovative collaborations must be strengthened to achieve the target. It has great potential, making energy a subject that must be managed carefully to fulfill the needs of the nation. The Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources is here to ensure that energy management in Indonesia is available, affordable, sustainable, and beneficial for the prosperity of the Indonesian people.